Oh shit, it stopped. I don't know when it stopped.
Oh shit, Tilak!
This is still recording, but I'm still recording. Alright.
That's my worst profile.
So
I thought I clarified because you said I'll meet that fight.
yeah. I want to try and do something a little bit different. So this is a sort of podcast styled video. I want to do more of these. I don't actually have a name for it yet, so if you have any suggestions, let me know. But I basically want to put more people on that are either really inspiring or have a really good story. So yeah, just trying to share more of that. You have a really amazing story, and I kind of want to go into that today.
So as a kid, my recollection of being a kid, very quiet. I was one of those people that if somebody said to me something at school, something sarcastic, I'd come home and I'd go, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that to them. So I was always very quiet. I never knew what to say in front of my friends. If they said something, I wouldn't really know how to respond. So I was always really quiet. And then as I grew up, as I just evolved, different friend circles, and then really the making of me was when I went to uni. And I went to uni and I was in an environment away from home where it was almost about survival. And I thought, being the shy and retired person that I was, that wasn't going to work for me. I needed to really survive and, connect with people. And the only way to do that was really start to look at how other people behave, how they are, and just learn and grow from that. And that's when I started to find myself and my energy.
It's 2024, it's January. I know we've always been speaking about going to the gym and like all these, well, a lot of people have those goals, but do you have anything specific for 2024 that you want to accomplish? Or
yeah, so last year for me was really about kind of like maintaining the transformation that I've gone through with my physical well-being and my fitness side of things. So it was all about maintaining, but then on top of that, for me, I wanted to do a lot more around getting out, traveling, but also giving back in some kind of way, some sort of charity, some sort of volunteering. And that was the thought in my head in January was charity. That's the only word that came up in my head in January was the word charity. I didn't think anything more of it. I didn't really set out a plan or anything, but I almost feel like I subconsciously manifested it because then as the months went on, I ended up getting involved in amazing charity events, one of which you filmed recently, where we've then gone on to inspire the communities, really start to reach out to the underserved communities in the Northwest and really make an impact. So, so this year is about taking that to the next level. On a personal note, I think for me, I want to do something different. So I want to get involved in a different project, but the foundation of anything that I do has to be about inspiring someone somewhere. So, whether that's something about where I do more of these podcasts or get involved in campaigns that start to raise awareness of, kind of female empowerment, women of a certain age, because I'm of a certain age, going through changes in life and how you can still be motivated and inspired to still hit goals, regardless of kind of where you are in your life.
yeah, no, I think that's really well put because obviously it's something that I'm trying to do as well as inspire more people. I want to talk about a lot of the points that you mentioned, especially the event that we filmed about empowering women in technology, which I think is really important. But if we go right to the beginning, if you can remember this far, I think
I'm old, but I'm sure I can.
So you were the first person in our family to get a degree. And well, that's what Dada says. I'm pretty sure it's true.
Yes, it is.
So obviously that's a big thing, especially being a woman as well and being brown. If you can think back to that time, obviously against all the stereotypes and all the like set boundaries that society puts, what was your like? Why did you want to get a degree? And was it purely because like your parents forced you, or like what was your motivation at that time, if you can remember?
I think that for me at that time, it was something that wasn't really understood as a thing that Indian girls did. The blueprint of your life in that generation was that if you went to college, that's great. But your blueprint was to get married, have children, have a family, and that was literally it. Those were the expectations. There wasn't anything above and beyond that, especially for me anyway. So when it came to university, I don't really actually know what it was. I went to college just by default because everybody else was doing it. A lot of what I did when I was younger, I was just kind of following. I was just looking at what other people were doing and just kind of following in that direction. So it really wasn't something that was common in our culture, in our community. So I'm not surprised that it wasn't mapped out for me in that way at home. So when I was at college, I was just kind of finishing an NVQ that I'd done, and I was getting ready for just the working world because that's all there was going to be for me. And then one of my friends said to me, she was like, "Well, why don't you apply for uni?" And I was like, "I don't really know what it is, and I'm not really sure, like, I just see all these people filling in these application forms, but I don't really know what that is and what it means." And it was literally a week before, and she'd said it to me, and I was like, "Honestly, I've got no idea." And she basically said, "Just copy my form," and I was just like, "But I don't even understand the course." She was like, "Just do it." She goes, "Just do it." And at that time, 1995, was the fee to send off the form, right? So I just literally copied everything. Obviously, I wrote my own personal statement, barely, but I sent it off, and I actually got in. And then I was thinking, oh my God, it was all really surreal. It was a bit like a dream because when I got in, I still didn't have a clue what I was doing, But again, even then, when I got into uni, it wasn't a course that I thought, oh my God, I've always wanted to get into IT. That wasn't my passion. I didn't know what my passion was at the time. I had no idea. And I had always liked beauty, but that definitely wasn't a career then. And so I just kind of went with the flow, if that makes any sense. And then off I went to Manchester to study.
Oh wow. So yeah, obviously since then, you've obviously developed this career in tech, and obviously just looking at my like friend circle and people in my life, I've not really come across a lot, if not any, I don't think, women wise that are in technology or that really do IT. I feel like a lot of the girls that I've gotten to know, they are all in the medical field, and I don't know if that's because they're just pushed to do that, or they're either like nurses, doctors, something medical or something professional. Whereas there's not a lot in tech or business, that sort of thing. So I think it's really interesting that you sort of went that way, even though you didn't,
It wasn't intentional, but I wouldn't change it. And I think that IT has become such an amazing space for women, and there are just, this is the generation where people are now sitting and listening, and women are just so talented. You always imagine IT, male, geeky stereotype, but now IT is for anyone that wants to do it. And IT doesn't have to mean hardcore coding. IT is so many different things. IT is relationship management. It's talking to people. It's communicating. It's not hands on a keyboard. So it's something that's changed over time, and it's opened the space up, especially for women. There's a lot more to do to make it more inclusive, but I cannot do enough to encourage women to get into tech.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because even when I went to that event, it is literally what you say. Like, people think, oh, IT is literally like nerdy, someone behind the keyboard, it's like coding or it's programming or it's just computer based. But even for someone who's quite like into IT as well, it's like, oh, like there's other things like relationship management or customer integration and just stuff that really is under the bracket of IT, but it's nothing to do with IT. It could be something completely different. So now I want to go on to a bit about like your sort of comeback story, if that makes sense. So like
Dun, dun,
obviously,
dun.
yeah. So it's obviously something that you've helped me with, which I think this is the story element that I really like, is the fact that when I look around at everyone in life, it's very linear. Like, a lot of people's life is very linear, but then it's sort of flat, not in a sad way, but it flatlines. It's kind of like, oh, like
complacency as well. People become complacent in where
exactly, and it's like, oh, like they'll do their schooling, they'll get a job, and then it's kind of like they'll stick to that job. They might get a little bit high, but there's no real progression. There's no like career goals. It's kind of like, oh, like this is it, and then they get married, have kids, and then it's kind of just like sustain that lifestyle. And I feel like that's normal for everyone, not just people like in our culture. But obviously with you, you were in a long-term relationship / marriage, and that ended, and it was 10 years, right?
It was 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, 7.
So it was a really long time, and then to come out of that, and normally when anyone goes through heartbreak or something traumatic, it's you have two choices.
Yeah.
You can either
Sink or swim.
yeah, perfect. That's it. That literally just you can either just it can really hit you hard, or you can just make it into like a situation you want. I feel like, obviously, as someone who saw you go through that process, it was really interesting to see how you developed yourself and like coached yourself through it, and now seeing where you are now. So obviously, I was quite lucky enough to like pick your brain about every single process, even when I went through something similar. And I was like, oh, like how did you heal? How did you let go? How did you grow? And like all these words that on Instagram, you just see them so many, like people make videos constantly, and I feel like for people that don't know what these words mean, it's not really gonna have much weight to it. But I feel like once you've been through it, you'll understand it.
Yeah.
So, obviously, if you can recap the story a little bit about how that all went down, and when it did end, and you were at probably one of the lowest points, what did you like? What did you like feel, and how did you sort of get yourself out of that?
You know, I think I mentioned the word surreal before, and it was really surreal because when I got to that point where I knew that this relationship had come to an end, it was quite surreal because it's almost like it's happening, but it's happening to someone else, and you're just watching the story play out. When I finally kind of moved away from the situation and moved back home, I think the turning point, there's always a point for somebody where they have to get to that point. So even if in their gut they know a situation's not right for them, there's a point they have to reach before they take that step that they need to take, right? So I took that step, and then when I moved home, the thing that really made me and was like where I just really pivoted was I remember getting upset once, just because you're grieving the loss of a relationship. And I remember just being upset and talking to my mum and saying, you know, I can't believe this situation's happened to me. And then she's kind of patting me on the back. So trying to console me, very basic, consoling, by the way. And then at the same time, she was going, you know, Amita, but the thing is, like, if you're gonna feel this sad, you might as well go back. And I was like crying, and I was like, huh, what? And then I thought, actually, she's right. I left the situation because I was miserable. I'm now not in that situation. So what am I doing? And she said to me, she goes, your world is wide open. So just now live your life. And that was the beginning of me leaving everything behind and just focusing forward. And one of the things I didn't do is I didn't take any resentment forward with me. Whatever happened, I left it in the past. I moved forward because I think sometimes it's absolutely understandable to feel resentment, but it doesn't hurt the other person. It just hurts you. And I thought, you know what? I've suffered enough. I've been through enough. So now I need to just cut it clean and just keep moving forward. And that's what I started doing.
Yeah. No, I obviously you've told me lots of like advice like that, and I remember when I was going through something similar, and it's so obviously because you've been through it, right? So you were talking from experience, and when I was at that stage, I was like, yeah, but how? Like, you know, you either can't stop thinking, you overthink, you know, you feel like that feeling in the pit of your stomach. Like sometimes you try as hard as you can not to think about it, and you still think about it, or you know, it just keeps coming back. So like, was there any like techniques that you used, or
Loads.
yeah? So
Absolutely
like,
loads of techniques.
for people that might be struggling with that or going through it right now, like what sort of tips would you say?
Loads of things, right? There's not any one pill that you can take that's going to fix everything, right? And I wouldn't recommend it either, but the reality is you've got to do loads of different things so sometimes you can, like you said, you can get yourself stuck in these intrusive thoughts. You think you're all right, and then all of a sudden a thought comes into your head, which is an upsetting thought about the trauma from the past, and then that thought just starts repeating, and then in your head it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then your whole day is consumed by this one thought. You've not achieved anything, you're really anxious and upset because it's just left you feeling that gut-wrenching pain, right? So there's loads of things that you can do, and the main thing to do is always, in those instances, you need to kind of look at applying the more CBT type techniques where you interrupt that thought. So sometimes you're not strong enough to just stop thinking, and stopping thinking about something is not the answer. The answer is, what can you do in that moment to interrupt that thought? And the things that you could do is like physical things, like just stand up, get up, walk outside, go for a walk, go upstairs, down the stairs, go and do something different, go and make a quick phone call. Anything that you can do to disrupt that thought. And then on occasions, when the thoughts don't go away, that's the time when you sit down and you write the thought out in black and white. The minute you write it down, it's really weird because everything is always bigger in your head. Excitement is always bigger in your head. Bad things are always bigger in your head. So the minute you write them down, it makes it real, and then you challenge what you're thinking. So you go, right, okay, so how realistic, how real is what I'm thinking? Is that an actual real thought? What's the worst thing that could happen to me based on the thought that I'm thinking right now? And then you talk yourself down, and then by the time you've gone through those questions, that thought that was in your head starts to reduce in terms of impact. So those are the kind of things you can do. Mental well-being, hitting the gym, starting to do things that are new. I started my weight loss transformation, as you know. That was something new for me, something I've always been, a big curvy girl, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But for the first time in my life, that I started looking, and it wasn't revenge body. I'd love to say it was, but it really wasn't. It was all for me. It was I just wanted to do something different with my life because I'd spent my whole life doing this, and now that didn't work. I was like, right, so there's no blueprint for my life anymore. I can literally do anything. And so I started doing loads of different things.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say revenge body, because I feel like, especially when gym was something that helped me a lot just to clear my head and not feel that pain. And like, it's funny because whenever I spoke to people in the gym, it was like a lot of the people that were in there, obviously there is the whole health aspect, but a lot of it is all mental. Either like it was stress or something going on in their life, or it was like a breakup or girl issues. And the interesting thing was, it was like a lot of people were either sort of, that was their way of like using that pain. So instead of like crying about it, channeling it, yeah. And I feel like that's something that I tried, where I was like, oh, like I'm feeling this pain and hurt. So instead of just crying about it, and I think it is good to like let it out and not keep it bottled in. I think it was good just being like, oh, I've got all this emotional energy.
How do I get rid of it? And
how do I get rid of it, or how do I use it in a productive way? So like you said, right? It's not necessarily like, oh, I'm trying to show them what they missed out on. It's like, oh, like I'm feeling this pain, but I have a lot of emotional energy. And if I've got that emotional energy, I'd rather put that into something. So either, like you said, developing a new skill, going to the gym, and really just like using that for something good.
Yeah, and you've got to remember, working out does release endorphins. So in a time where you aren't feeling great because of what you've been through, doing exercise does release those good feeling endorphins. So it is actually positive for your mental well-being.
Yeah, no, that's wicked. And obviously it's been a few years now. I think, talking from experience as well, like I think I would say I've been on this healing journey quite fresh compared to you. So I'd say like, even though I'm a year or 2 years in, I'd say like I'm 90% there, but it still hits every now and then. Like you'll get these flashbacks, so it'll hit. So I think my question is, do you feel like you are fully healed? Do you think anyone can ever be fully healed?
No.
Or do you think it's just a process and it's like, you'll never quite get there, but it gets better with time, with more interaction? Is it a case of forgetting, or is it a case of learning to live with that?
It's how can I explain this? The way that you think about the situation changes. It doesn't get eradicated from your mind, right? You still have flashbacks. And what happens is, it's such a horrible cliche, but time is a healer is the truth, because the more gap you have between the event and, you kind of moving away from the event, your perspective of what happens changes. Like your connection to it changes. Maybe not the perspective, but the connection to it changes. When it feels raw and it feels like you're constantly reliving it, you can't remember it like that as much, and you remember faintly what happened, and the emotion starts to lessen towards that event, and so you never forget it. But then you get to a point where it's like, it pops into your head, and then you just let the thought come in and out, and it doesn't charge your emotion as much as it used to. So the way that you think about that event and those past events and those past traumas changes over time, but you don't forget them. They just don't hurt you and affect you as much.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So obviously, I remember speaking about this ages ago when it was like, oh, like I had this like very hopeless romantic type of view on like what is the definition of love. Like, oh, you have your soulmate. Like, there's one person and that's it. Like, there isn't oh, you can have multiple people. And I remember you telling me like, oh, like actually what you find is like you can have multiple soulmates.
Yeah.
So I think my next question is, what's your definition of love? Obviously, it must have changed throughout all your experiences, but like, I still believe it's one of the most powerful things out there, and you can't really. It's really like confusing to understand fully, and like I feel like a lot of people have different ideas of what love is. If it's physical, if it's mental, if it's a bit of both, if it's like more spiritual on a deeper level. So, I guess to you, if someone asked you like, how would you define love?
So for me, it's definitely something that's changed. My understanding of what it was, I was a little bit of like a hopeless romantic. And I've also grown through my experience, right? So the way that I look at things now is that I've learned to be independent in my relationship. So before, I used to think, oh, you need to be stuck to each other like glue. You know, you should want to spend every minute with each other. That's how a tight relationship is. And, you know, all of those kind of things and amazing romantic, you know, Instagrammable meals and going out and date nights and all of that kind of stuff. And it's all great. I'm not saying it's not. But I used to base the value of a relationship on the fact that you needed to be, in order to be solid, you needed to be together all the time. That was what was in my head. And what I've then come to learn, and what is now my definition of love, is somebody that you trust. Trust is absolute paramount for me. And that's somebody that lets you be who you need to be, and then pushes you to be the best that you can be, and you do the same for them. So you can go off and be the person you want to be. You can excel and take on goals and go and do whatever you want to do. And they're still there. Your relationship is always there. That doesn't change. And they can do the same thing. And then you both come together and spend time together as well. So I think a healthy, good relationship is based on the fact that you have your own aspirations and your own goals, and then you have goals together.
Yeah. No, I think that's something that I learned where it was like who you really are. And I feel like a lot of people say this was you need to spend time on your own, figure out who you are as a person, making sure that you don't rely on anyone. And like, I think you said this as well, where it's like the other person should add to your happiness.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be your happiness.
Yeah.
Um,
Like before, when I used to be upset, I used to think, why isn't he making this go away? Like, that's his role. Like, he should be helping me when I would do that for him. And then I realized, actually, happiness is in my control. It's not in anyone else's control. So if I'm not feeling great, then I need to think about how I'm feeling, and I need to find a solution to getting out of the way that I'm feeling right now. It's not his job. If he can support me and he helps me, which he does, then that's great. But it's not his job to eradicate my sadness. Yeah. That's for me to fix. That's for me to look inside.
Yeah, no, I think if people took more accountability for relationship, not just relationships or romantically, but also friendships as well. Like I've spoken to so many friends where it's like, oh, like it's very one-sided. And I'm obviously like being a girl, you'll have like girls, I think more than guys have loads of friends, right? You'll have so many groups, and like you'll have your core, but then you also have like other groups. And I think the big thing is like understanding, oh, like these are your actual friends. Like, if they respect you enough to check up on you and you do the same for them, that's a healthy relationship. Whereas I feel like, which is kind of sad, but a lot of my friends are like, oh, like I'll talk to you when I need you, or like, oh, if I really need you, like I'll catch up with you, otherwise we just won't talk. And then it's this weird idea of like, oh, then you get used, or it's a very one-sided friendship. So like, have you ever been in that situation where it's like you don't really know who your friends are or who your real friends are, and like how do you navigate having multiple friends, and like, do you have like oh, these are my core, and then these are the people that I'll say hi to every now and then?
Yeah, I think one of the things to really understand is that, friendships are always evolving. Because you're evolving, you're always going to change, right? And sometimes you do think that you're going to have certain friends for life. And if you, like you mentioned before, if you're linear and your friend circle's linear and you're all linear, then it's fine. It's all stable. You're all the same. You're all getting on. But sometimes things change. Sometimes you change. You go through things. You grow. You evolve. Or sometimes your friend does the same. And then it just means that sometimes you can outgrow friendships. So that's one thing. You can outgrow friendships, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no need to have any sort of like negative feelings. It's okay to sometimes just let go of friendships because they don't serve you or the other person, right? That's something I learned very recently, and letting go in a loving way is always the best way to do it if you can. Making sure that you're friends with the right people, that again goes on expectations. So I've always been so loyal. I'm so committed. I'm so dedicated. Like, I am your ride or die friend. Like, if I'm in your corner, I am in your corner. Like, super loyal, always there. But then not everybody has got the capacity or the desire to want to do the same thing back. And as soon as that happens, you think to yourself, oh, right, well, I've done all of this and this is it. Like, when I need it, they're not showing up for me the way I showed up for them. Right? Goes back to your, well, they just call you when they need something kind of thing. So it's a learning experience, and then you have to learn to hold back yourself, and you have to learn to make sure that you're able to balance your friendships by putting your needs first and making sure that you're doing what's right for you in your life as well as being a friend to them. So it's not always healthy to just show up for someone and put everything aside that is important to you because you're trying to help someone, and that's such an amazing gesture, but then when they don't do it back, it's not nice, is it?
Yeah.
So the main thing is to make sure, and this is a big learning thing for me, is to take a step back and look after yourself, right? And then make sure that you can be there for your friends when you can be there for them. And if your friendships are genuine, they will do the same thing and they'll stick around. And sometimes you doing this will then start to highlight the friends that were really in it for the wrong reasons. And that's when you decide, okay, maybe I don't want to pursue that friendship anymore.
Obviously, I've been really big on communicating, and like you said, there's a lot of like friendships that don't work out. Have you ever? You have to be honest. Have you ever ghosted anyone or just ignored them, or have you always been? And I feel weird sometimes doing this when I no longer want a friendship with someone, even though they see me as a friend, but I know that they're sort of in it for like my advice or like just because I can be there for them, but they're not really there for me. So I've had to be like, hey, like not formally, but it's kind of been like, oh, like, I no longer want to be friends with you, or this is the situation, like, I'm focusing on me. So, have you ever communicated that you basically don't want to be friends?
No, I
Or
haven't.
are you just
So
ghosted?
I've never said that. Now I don't know if this is you saying that is that like a male perspective and that's what you would do. And don't shoot me because there are differences, right? The way that women handle situations and the way that men handle situations is different, right? Like once upon a time, somebody said to me, or I read it somewhere that, men would rather be trampled on by, elephants than tell someone they weren't interested. Like that's how much they avoid that conversation. Whereas women are a little bit more, because we're more in tune with our emotions, we're a little bit more comfortable, speaking our minds, right? So having said that, I still haven't said to someone blatantly, I don't want to be your friend. I've never been in that situation. I have changed my friendships with people over time, but what I've done is I've just changed the way that I engage with them. So if I was seeing someone all the time, I'd just be less available. I would do different things, and then I'd just evolve the friendship over time. But I never actually just phone someone or just cut them off, ignore their messages, or phone them and say I don't want to be your friend. Right. I'm not saying what I'm doing is right, but my approach was just one where I just changed the friendship over time.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that because I actually think not the complete opposite, but I think very differently because I feel like girls are normally the ones that, well, at least like my age, are the ones that would rather either ghost or sort of slowly like pull back, or they just won't respond to you. But they'll still maintain somewhat of a friendship in case they need you, or in case they want to talk. But they'll keep that. Whereas I feel like for guys, I think it's a lot. I do agree that a lot of them would rather just keep a girl as a friend rather than tell them like I'm not interested. But at the same time, I feel like guys are sort of a yes or no. Like it's so like
It is a lot more,
basic.
like, yeah,
it's like
black
just
and
tell me
white,
yes or
yeah.
no. I think this applies to both. Is confusion is the worst feeling. Like knowing that it is a thing or it's not a thing is so much better than for it to be a maybe. Because it's just like it's
You
giving you
know what
that
it
false
is?
hope.
It's
that hope.
horrible. It's absolutely. I can't even begin to imagine the world today and being immersed in like the dating scene because, you know, it is just awful because you're absolutely right. Why can't you just be clear? But the world has changed so much where sometimes people just don't know, so they don't want to cut things off, and sometimes they do know, but they like the attention. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many different reasons why people keep you in your life, but it's hard when if you have a specific goal, which is to meet someone, and they're just faffing about and keeping you on the side, and they can't make them out. It messes with your head, and it's horrible. So sadly, there's not a clear-cut answer. You have to, the main thing is, what you have to do is you have to follow your gut and you've got to do what's right for you. So if you feel like somebody is being a certain way, either you talk to them about it or you just start to create the distance so that, you know, and sometimes, you know, when I said I don't ever tell someone I don't want to be your friend, because sometimes when you change your behavior, maybe that friend then does realize the value of your friendship and maybe they start to adjust themselves because they actually don't want to lose the friendship. Maybe they just got used to you always being there, so they were kind of a little bit more relaxed. But then if they realize that actually this person's unhappy and they're not communicating with me as much anymore, maybe that would actually change the way that they are with you. So maybe that's why it's not always good to just start cutting people off straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's a very fine line between just being like, okay, if you've not texted me in like a day, we're no longer friends.
Yeah,
Compared to being
exactly.
like,
Follow your
okay, it's
gut.
been a few months.
Yeah.
You put in a certain amount of effort. I've seen a lot of people that do this like 3 chances rule or 5 chances where, you know, they'll always be the one to reach out. And then if they have to do that consistently 3 or 4 or 5 times and it's not reciprocated, they'll obviously mention it. And if there's still no improvement, then they sort of
And
like,
I
right.
get why they do that, right? Because they're having to police themselves because they know that if I don't do this and have this threshold, then in 12 months' time, I'm going to be sitting here making excuses for the same person as to why they're not communicating with me. And you know, you get stuck in that rut, don't you? So they're probably trying to give themselves these boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, like I said, like all this like knowledge of like healing and going through it, and I think obviously speaking from a girl's perspective, like for people that are going through something similar, maybe a long-term relationship or something, or a heartbreak or whatever it is, what would be your like top 3 pieces of advice? Something that they can either actionable things they can do. So like you said, like whenever you're getting into an overthinking phase, do this, or you know, something that they can practically do or take away from this. So 3 things that they can do to improve themselves or help them on their sort of healing journey.
Right. So practical tips are going to be when you're sitting there wondering, like, you know, should I stalk them on social media? Don't. And if you feel compelled to do that, again, that's an intrusive thought. Anything that takes you back into a memory or about the past or wanting to dig in those areas, get up, go and do something else. Go for a walk, run up and down the stairs, you know, just do anything that's going to break that thought and that moment for you. That's going to be the key. And you just keep doing it. You just keep doing it. And if it doesn't work, start writing things down and start thinking about, you know, what you're thinking. Is it really as bad as you think? And remember, the person you were with is just a person at the end of the day. And what you still existed before you knew them. You still used to smile before you even met them. You used to have fun and go out and have a laugh before you even knew they existed. So you'll do that after they've gone. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they created you. So they're just a person that were there at a moment in time. And also, never regret it either because there'll be things that you learn from it.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, 2 more.
Gym, definitely. Endorphins. If you're really struggling, get out, get to the gym. You know, the gym sometimes is a really nice place. There's always really helpful people in the gym. Like, you know, they're very like supportive. Like if you do a class, there's always people geeing you on. You need that sometimes. You need other people around you Try and spend time with family and friends if you can. If you don't, call people. And, you know, if you are fortunate enough and you're really struggling, I would 100% recommend therapy. I use it as life coaching now. There's no stigma attached to it. Therapy is life for me. It's the thing that's got me through. Even if I want to achieve a goal and I feel like I haven't got the tools, I want to do this, but I don't know how. I'm always seeking therapy to help me get the tools. So don't be shying away from that if you need it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point you mentioned about therapy. And circling back to the gym, I feel like especially for girls, it's so intimidating. Being like, like gym's a very like guy thing. Like you get a lot of weirdos. Like you just feel very insecure about obviously the way you look, not knowing what you're doing. And obviously you go to the gym, right? So, how did you overcome those things and being like, like, don't want people looking at me? I don't want guys hitting on me. I don't want like to feel insecure about the way I look. Like, how did you help?
I think the way to do it is you've got to keep reminding yourself is everything you just said is, oh, you know, I feel insecure with what I'm wearing and blah blah blah. But the reality is that's in your head. You think that they think that. They're probably not even, not to flatter yourself, well, they're probably not even looking at you. Like, do you know what I mean? They're probably looking through you. We think, oh my God, they're looking at me, they're looking at what I'm wearing. They're probably not even doing that. They're probably looking behind you. Do you know what I mean? And you're like getting all yourself worked up over nothing. So all I do is I remind myself that this is what I think they think. They're probably not thinking this at all, right? It's all in my head. So then I drop those thoughts. And then, you know what? The gym is a place where people do feel insecure. But what I love about athleisure stuff now and fashion is that there's so much amazing fitness stuff. And I'm a huge fashion, like, junkie. And for me, even when I go to the gym, I'll wear things that make me feel good. So then I'd walk into the gym knowing I feel good. So I don't really care if someone's looking at me, and I'll just be like, yeah, they're looking at me for the right reasons. Like that's how I start to think. So there's loads of things that you can do that if it makes you feel good, dressing good for the gym, getting on some good gym gear, you know, do it.
You know what? That's actually a really interesting point where I think there's something that I've learned over the past few years is it's all mental. Like with everything,
It
not just the
is.
gym.
It's all
And
in our heads.
It's so crazy where it's so stupid as well. 'Cause it's like, oh, even if you wear, like, every time I squat, I wear these shorts. I don't know why I wear them, but they just feel right. Like, they just feel like they sort of, I know it doesn't do anything performance-wise, but it just feels like I can lift more when I have those on. And I was like, oh, I've noticed that where it's like, oh, it could be something so small like, oh, if I eat this thing or if I feel good mentally, even before I get to the gym, I know it's going to be a good day. Yeah. Whereas if I've already failed or like I've not won the day or something's not right, even going into that, I've already failed. Like I've already like gone in with that mindset. And it's funny because what you said about like people checking you out, I was doing squats the other day and there was a guy who like just kept looking at me. I was like, why is he looking? And I feel like a lot of guys do this, is they'll just stare at the mirror and just check themselves out. And I was like, why does he keep looking in my direction? And then obviously I walked around and he was still doing it. I was like, oh, he's just checking himself out.
Yeah, he's not looking at me.
I was like, he's not looking at, and I was like, I feel like for a lot of guys, they're either so like self-obsessed with just how they look and they're so dialed in that they're just either checking themselves out, or some of them are just like so zoned out that they'll just like, they won't even really be paying attention, where it's like,
and sometimes you've got to think to yourself, like, you know, sometimes when you go to the gym and you see a guy and he's got like sleeveless like tank top on and you're thinking, what is the need? Yeah. Like you're not doing cardio. So I know that it's not because you're going to get hot. Yeah. But the thing is, it's only like when I started training that I realised that when I was like in front of a mirror once and I was, you know, I'd been going to the gym for a bit. And so then when I was in the mirror and I was like lifting a weight and I was like, oh, I just saw that move. and I was like, they're looking at their progress. Yeah. So sometimes I'm thinking, oh my God, he really rates himself looking in the gym. But sometimes they're just almost, that is keeping them going. Yeah. Looking at that muscle move as their arm moves in the mirror is giving them the motivation to keep training. So sometimes it's not as shallow as you think it is. Yeah. Sometimes it is that shallow, but you know, it's not always.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's one of those where it's like, even, I know you, I don't know if you use the sauna, but I think this is the weirdest, like the coolest thing that's happened is every time I go to the gym, you have your session, and then I always end my sessions with the sauna. And it's really weird because it's such a variety of people. There could be like really old dads in there, and there could be like really like young kids, and it's like, it's all this time where everyone just gets in the sauna. You're there for 10, 15 minutes. And you just have a conversation. And
It's like the sauna
it's
brings you
therapy.
together.
I know, and it's the weirdest thing where it's like, oh, we could just be doing the most intense workouts, but we're all sweating in this one room and struggling to breathe. Or it's like, oh, it's hot. And the other day, like a guy just started talking to me, and the one biggest thing I've learned is always be grateful for everything, because you don't know what any of those people,
No, you
why
don't.
they're in there
No,
or
you
what
don't.
they're going through,
Yeah.
right? And this one guy, he seemed very happy, and then he was just talking about his day, talking about how someone in his family was going through something, and he kind of needs to step out. And this was like, I'm like 24, and he's probably like what 50, like in his late like 50s, and he's just talking about life, just to a complete stranger. And I'm like, oh my god, that's like crazy that you just open up like that. But I'm like also thinking like, oh crap, like
Because they're
what if he doesn't have
strangers, they're
anyone?
not going to judge you.
Exactly, no one will judge you. But also, it also like makes you think like, imagine if he didn't have that support system. I'm not saying I was that support
They
system,
don't.
but if the gym,
A lot of people
if the
don't.
gym wasn't that support system, like mentally, there's nothing that can help. And obviously, I don't think I did much to change that. But even when I came away, I was like, oh, well, that was a nice thing that happened. So it's like, it probably affected both of our days, or it's something different. But I'm like, wow, like I
I
definitely
don't
agree.
think I think we really sometimes get so stuck in our own minds that we don't realize that just a simple 5-minute conversation with someone you don't know what it could go on and do to that person's life that day in a positive way. So I think you're right. I think you absolutely cannot take life for granted. I always make time for people because, like you said, you don't know what your conversation is going to do in a positive way to someone if you just took the time for 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And obviously, one of the reasons why I wanted to shoot this podcast slash type video in this apartment was because obviously, like,
This was
it's
the beginning.
amazing.
This was the beginning for me.
This is the beginning. And also, like, I think this is a very symbolic, like, this whole space, like, obviously, we saw this when you were, at Badada's house and you were looking for an apartment, right? Like, you were at that point where it's like, I have nothing right now. Like, this is your bit where you grow and, like, you figure stuff out. And I remember when we found this apartment and like, you had to look at it and you're like, oh, like, I can see it. Like, just get it done. And obviously, I don't know how many years it's been since you got this apartment, and now looking around, and this is again the reason why I wanted to do it here was like, this is a metaphor for like, or like sort of not a trophy, but this is your growth, right? Like this shows how far you've come, and like.
But the only reason that I'm here today is because I made that decision. I made a decision at that time to leave the past in the past, but I made a promise to myself to have enough respect for myself to move it, to keep it moving. And I started to then make decisions, and that was it. The decision was made. Like, I was going to have a property by this certain date, and there was nothing else to talk about. There was no ifs and buts. That's all I thought of. And then I just went ahead and made it happen.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's one thing I've took away from that is like, just setting goals and working towards them and having a deadline, rather than just being very passive, like, it could happen. Like, instead of being like, no, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. And I think one of the things just to mention on like manifestation and setting goals, one of the things you have to absolutely do is you have to set a goal and then almost detach yourself from it. So even though you're working towards it, you can't be obsessed by the goal to the point where it has to work out exactly how you envisioned it, because sometimes things don't. And then sometimes you have to go, like, there's lots of different, when you're traveling from Manchester to London, there's lots of different ways to get to the same destination. Yeah. So sometimes your path could go in lots of different ways. You'll ultimately get to your goal, but you have to be relaxed and open-minded enough to be okay when it doesn't instantly work out for you, but you keep it going, you keep moving in with the thought that it's not a curveball, it's a learning experience. I'm learning something from this and it's taking me to the next step. And because sometimes if you become fixated, if it doesn't work out exactly how you wanted to, you're disappointed, you'll stop and you won't hit your goal.
Yeah. No, then that's a really good point. And just like one of the final things now is, obviously, when you look around, like, how do you feel knowing, like, do you ever do that thing where you reflect and like, oh crap, like, this is crazy, like, where my life
reflect
was
enough.
and how, like, obviously you're very fortunate, and obviously it's through hard work, but like very blessed to have your own place, how you wanted it as well, right? Where it's like, you've probably been at that point where you weren't fully satisfied. Like, do you think you're like happy now? Do you think you're like how do you feel now that you've got to that
I
level?
think, I think compared to where I was, I feel incredibly blessed. I feel very blessed to have the family that I've got around me, and the friends that I've got around me. It is amazing. But the thing that I feel so happy about is how proud I am of myself and how I learned to understand myself, put myself first, and start taking myself forward and not expecting, other people to make me happy, finding ways to make myself happy. So I am happy. I am a human. So there are days, and I am going through certain changes in life now as you get older, where, not every day is a good day. And for anyone, actually, not every day is a good day. And also, learning to accept that it's okay to have a bad day, then you pick up the next day and you keep it moving, right? So I am largely in the best place of my life. I'm mentally in a great place, career-wise, I'm in an amazing place, and my friends and social circles in a great place. So yeah, I really, I just want to keep it going. I'm excited. One of the things I'm the most excited about, and what I've learned, is I can literally do anything I want. Yeah. Like, that's what excites me.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've really liked seeing in like you, and seeing that growth where it's like, I feel like I like seeing how, everyone in our family has lived their life and been like, all right, like, how do I kind of want my future to look like? And it's so reassuring knowing that like, oh, like you can go through something like that and still win and still, not let it get you down. So like obviously it's been a big motivating and sort of inspirational factor for me, and it's something that I look on, and whenever I'm going through, I'm like, oh, like, oh, definitely, like, this is how I'm feeling, or like, oh, this is hurting, like, how do I fix this? You've always like helped me through that. And I know it's obviously something you want to do, and through the Cyber Girls event that you mentioned, about how you want to empower women, and the next generation with like not just like technology, but also just how to live life and inspiring other people. So like for girls out there, like what sort, do you have a message for?
I do have a message, actually, and the message is it's okay to not know what you want to do. It's actually really normal. Like, I felt so not normal when I was a kid because everybody knew what they were going to do. Like, they knew they were going to get A's in their GCSEs and, go off to do whatever in college. I had no idea, and I felt so bad and felt so like not good enough because I didn't know those things. And I'm in a place where I had no guidance. I had nobody guiding me. I was clueless. I never thought that I could achieve. I used to look at people and be like, I wish I had their life. I wish I was born into those lives where they had all this structure and I didn't have any of it. And today, I have everything I ever wanted. I went from someone not having a clue to looking in newspapers and be like, wish I was the pupil that was in the paper. Yeah. And I can sit here and say, I was on a national magazine cover, the cover of a magazine. I'm Indian and I was on a national cover of a magazine. Never in a million years could I have imagined that. So think about the girl that was clueless, didn't know what she was going to do, didn't have any guidance, wasn't that smart at school, is now working for a massive global tech company and was on the cover of a major magazine. Like, to me, that says you can literally do anything.
Yeah, and I think that was sick. Like, when we saw it, I was like, oh my God. Not only because it was a fitness, because we know you've always been trying to lose weight and be healthier.
It's been horrible. I've been trying my whole life.
and it's one of those where it's like, oh, you've been trying this for so long, right? And then firstly, not only to get that goal, but then get recognized and be in a magazine. It's like, oh, like she did it, like finally. So I think, yeah, it's just stuff like that where it's like, oh, like, doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't, because I feel like that as well, where there's times where I'm like, why am I so behind? Or like, why is it that I'm putting in this much effort? And then there's people, like, you compare a lot to other people, which is not a good thing to do. But sometimes, like, oh, I kind of want that, or I kind of wish I had a life like that. But at the same time, knowing that everyone's on their own journey, there's so many ways, like you said, to get there. And you will get there eventually, but you just gotta keep working at it and having that patience.
And also, there is privilege. There are certain people that have privilege, right? So, some people's journeys are a lot easier than others. But all I can say is where you've had nothing, where you've come from something where you haven't had any of that, that's what's going to be the fire that gets you to where you need to go to.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I feel like it's so annoying seeing like even I can say this about my brother, where it's like he's had so many things that I've not had. Even like silly things. It's like, oh, I have to like save my money so carefully. Like when I was younger, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can get two types of cheese when I go. Like, it's like I'd have to pick, and he can like spend as much money as he wants. But knowing like you're different people, you're in different situations.
And your journeys are different, right? And I think you got to remember is that sometimes it's so easy to feel resentful for a sibling. I definitely did, having two brothers, being in an Indian family, it's easy to feel like that. And I was a middle child. Like there's just so many things that could have messed me up, which they probably did. But the reality is I don't regret any of those experiences because the strength that I have, the resilience I have, is because of those situations. Yeah. So, sometimes if you think about it now, it's not nice, but in the future, when you look back, you think, actually, it's that experience that drove me to succeed.
And I do agree. I feel like that is such a motivating factor. It's like, I feel like you need to have that motivation. It's like, I feel like people already have it. They don't really have any motivation to do anything because they don't need to. Whereas I feel like for us, it's like, oh, we've been to that point where you've seen your parents struggle with basic needs.
Yeah.
Forget like luxury, forget about holidays. It's like, oh, can they afford to pay the bills? Can they afford to like feed us? And it's like that, like, I don't want to be in that situation where you can't, like, if you're outside, you have to think about being able to afford water or being able to afford like a sandwich if you need it. So I agree with that. It's all
Imagine
about
all of the challenges and the things that you have to deal with growing up as, somebody who's British with an Indian background. So it's the cultural aspect. It's trying to fit in and integrate. It's trying to make sure that you retain your culture. It's trying to make sure that, you can still integrate in society, but yet your parents, are not well off. So many things that you've got to contend with. So it's not really easy, but it's not impossible.
To wrap it up, obviously, thank you so much for
No
being
problem.
on the
Anytime.
podcast. I think you've obviously dropped a lot of truth bombs, and a lot of what you've shared has obviously helped me, but like I hope it helps a lot more people in terms of being on that journey. And I think you mentioned a really important point about what it's like to be Indian or brown in a Western society, and obviously there's loads of stereotypes and different society norms that you have to get used to, and it's something that I want to do with my work as well, as like break that down. Showcase like how amazing our culture is, but also showcasing that girls are powerful too, and they have their own strengths, and like in some cases probably stronger than guys. So yeah,
it's all about respect, education, and interest, because you want to respect, the traditions and the culture you were born into, being British, right? It's amazing. At the same time, you are Indian, so you want to make sure that people understand that as well. You want to understand other people's culture. So I think if you keep respect, education, and interest in the center of everything you do, you can then go on to live in an inclusive society. There's still a lot of work to do in that area, but, you just got to have that open mind.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. And like I said so many times before, like you've obviously helped me a lot through my healing journey. I feel like I'm a good way in, but like I still have a way to go. And it's something that I want to share more about and do more stuff like this where it's like, oh, like understanding other people that have gone through it come out like so high and like achieved things that they never thought were possible. So yeah, just like you said, documenting like the gym, other experiences, and then hopefully documenting the process and helping other people through it. So yeah, big thank you for having you on. And then just finally, is there anything that you want to leave like people with? It can be anything at all, just random.
I think the only thing I would do is obviously we've kind of sat down and been quite vulnerable and really open, and our only real goal is that we've understood each other's journeys and done things that have helped each other get through certain things. And the goal of this is to hopefully help other people. It's not here to dictate to anybody. It's just there to hope that somebody else feels like this has helped them in some shape or form. And all I would want really is feedback. You know, if there's anything that you watched this video and you felt like you could resonate with it or related to it, then just feedback really, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think it's so important where obviously welcome all your like comments and ask questions. And I feel like one of the ways you learn is ask, right? So I know when I was going through it, and people that have been through it, and it doesn't always have to be about trauma, it can be about anything like life questions, anything that people are struggling with. I think obviously doing what I did, right? Like going to someone who's been through it is so helpful and so useful. So yeah, 100% feel free to comment if you have any questions, if you have any situations that you need help with. Maybe we could do like a little part 2 where we just have loads of people just comment questions and stuff and then just get your take on it and then just see how we would either act in those situations or how you'd respond to that.
Yeah, I think that's and again, I think I'll be up for that because as much as I look really youthful, we are different ages. And I think it's a great way to bring two different perspectives together.
Obviously, even though you look really young, and you're not even that old, but obviously there's a bit of an age gap. So I know like my generation, I know how people my age think. You obviously know the working professional, like, and obviously there's different challenges, pros and cons to both, right? So having like that well-rounded view of like how you can sort of win in both scenarios, I think would be sick. So yeah, wicked. All right, thank you so much for that. Yeah, like you heard it, guys. If you want to comment down any questions, any scenarios you want us to answer, anything you want Amitafoy to answer, comment them down below. We'll do a part 2. Yeah, hopefully it helped you guys out in one way, shape or form. So yeah.
Thank
George,
you.
wicked. Sweet, smashed it. That was the first one done.
Brilliant.
Wicked.
Hello, future waving. Time to turn the pages. Tell me what you're waiting for. New beginning.